The Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks podcast, Series 2, AI in the AECO and Beyond, is brought to you by Oculi. Oculi, bridging the intangible. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks. We're here on Series 2, all about the AI. So if you're new to the Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks podcast, we are a technology podcast for the curious and creative in the AECO and beyond. And today I am super stoked to have Daniel Peterson here, or maybe known as the Revit Wizard on the Twitterverse or Xaverse as it is now. Daniel, before we get into our chat about AI today and some cool custom GPT type stuff, why don't you tell everyone about yourself?
Hey, yeah, thank you so much, Carl. My name is Daniel Peterson. I work for the Beck Group in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a senior design technology coordinator. So essentially, it's a lot like a BIM manager. Get to play a lot with AI now as well, though, because I get fed a lot of great questions and support questions that kind of come up. So I have a lot of great training material. So it's kind of how AI or the Revit Wizard came about. Really excited about AI and kind of what it's going to bring to the AEC industry. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're certainly glad that you're here. And you may have seen, depending on when this comes out, back in early May, I went to a roundtable event, the AEC Acoustics event, and my topic was AI, how to use it practically for small teams. And one of the things that sort of started was I was the first one to have a conversation or to have a roundtable out of the group. And I thought I would start easy by just asking the 24 odd people in the room, what is their definition of AI? And my assumption was this would take a couple minutes, get the conversation started, but it took an hour. Everyone had a
Right.
strong opinion. Everyone was sort of generally for, but they had a different use case or a different reason why they wanted to use it. And it kind of took me a little bit aback how much everyone had a reason why, and their version was their way. And not that it was right or wrong, but everyone sort of sees it a little bit skewed. So I thought that might be a good way to get us started here is, what would you consider AI aside from just artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I would say AI is kind of just really the idea that we are using technology to assist us, right? To kind of make our jobs easier. And that really is what it comes down to. I think there's a lot of people that get a little bit spooked when they think about AI because there's been so much sci-fi material in the past. AI is a great, antagonist in movies and things like that. And we've seen a lot of that content. I think it's really easy to kind of imagine it going in a bad way. But just like computers and other kinds of technology, the internet or technology can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So it really just depends on how you use it and the context that you use it in. And I think we're really set up to use AI in a way that helps us to kind of speed up menial processes and to take busy work out and to really give us more time back so that we have more time to kind of focus on maybe more important things. So I really think it's a tool for our benefit, not something that we should kind of be afraid of or really want to like restrict. Or I think I've even heard of some firms saying that they don't allow any AI use right now until they have some better ideas. So I think it's just something to kind of keep an open mind about and then just kind of see where it goes.
I think that's a great point. And again, sometimes we have fear of what we don't know, or we get information that maybe isn't correct or accurate. But I think your ideology there is correct. It's just like robots in the workplace, or any sort of automation. The
Exactly.
idea is that it's not meant to replace what you do, but it's meant to make your life a little bit easier, so you have
Right.
more time to do the fun stuff in your job that you want to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you get an AI assistant of some sort that you're going to have Fridays off and go live the good life, although maybe you will, maybe we'll all get 4-day
Right.
weeks
Maybe
because of
one day.
AI. Yeah, but the idea of just to understand it and embrace it. um,
Right.
but I think you brought up another good point there about some firms saying, hey, you stay away from the AI. And I think it maybe for some people it's less of an idea of we don't like AI, but everyone has some fears about Is this data going to get used for testing? Is my
Right.
IP going to be compromised? And I don't think there's a malicious thought out there. I don't think OpenAI or Google or any of those are saying, hey, we need your IP from your little design firm. But I think it is mindful to be aware of that
Of
and
course.
to
Yeah.
make sure that you sort of understand. And for example, if you use, why am I drawing a blank? Copilot. So basically, the Microsoft version of
Microsoft's.
ChatGPT.
Yep.
If you purchase it, or even if you don't purchase it, but if you're using the enterprise suite of, what's it called now, Microsoft 365 instead of Office 365,
Right.
if you have that and you open up your Copilot, you'll notice right in the top corner that it will tell you that you have protected data and that this is data that's specific to your firm. Your firm
Exactly.
is branded on one side and the protected data is in the other. So there's certainly ways that you can verify without a lot of extra effort. But the key thing I think to take away is that uh, protecting your data and being aware of where your data is going is very important. But it also usually means you have to have a little bit of skin in the game to get that, because as I've heard
Exactly.
many
Yep.
times on different podcasts, if something is free, you're the product, not what you're using. So same thing with your
Exactly.
data. If you're not paying to keep it your data, that's your price to play.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of touched on that because with ChatGPT and obviously every different AI, there's lots of like Microsoft, like we just talked about. Google has one. There's Claude out there. There's
Mhm.
there's lots that are probably going to come up after this podcast is made. And the main thing is that there's going to be different tiers, right? So right now with ChatGPT, there's a free tier that anybody can sign up for, where you just create an account and you have a very limited number of messages that you can use. I think it's every 3 hours you can send 40 messages. I think that's the limit right now. And then if you pay for a plus account, that's like kind of the medium tier. That's what I have. That's $20 a month. That's you can create GPTs, the custom GPTs that Revit Wizard is, and different things like that. And then the next tier up is going to be the enterprise tier, like kind of like what you're talking about. And that's where you have a private server for just everybody that's connected to that enterprise account. The data is completely safe and secure for those enterprise customer accounts that are there. I don't have one of those accounts yet, obviously, because Beck has not decided to go enterprise yet. That's totally fine. I'm sure there's probably a couple firms out there that are thinking about it and things like that. But that is definitely the difference is the more you pay, obviously, the more security you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something to keep in mind. And I've tested lots of things. I did when I was doing the 100 days of AI. There's lots of
Hmm.
products you're testing, and one of the things that the majority of them are is they give you sort of that free tier. You get so many images you can create or
Right.
so many things. And again, it's to let you test it, because they
Exactly. And
all do
learn.
things a little
Yeah.
bit different to test and learn. And
Hmm.
in reality, with all the different options out there, if you only get 5 questions on this model, well, there's 10 different ones. So you could probably get your questions answered for free.
Exactly.
But there's also something to be said for continuity. And so if you're using
Right.
like the plus version of ChatGPT, you have all of your data in one spot, and
Right.
not necessarily for privacy reasons. Oh, that's great. But I've had times where I've gone back, even with my free account of ChatGPT, and I've got my list of history, and I've gone back into conversations to sort of
Right. So that
kickstart
it
them again.
remembers. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. So, but there is value to having that one location and keeping all that information in one spot.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
the other thing that I've seen recently, and again, not to get too far off topic, but I'm finding more and more, especially with the ones that are educational or academic in nature,
Mm.
they still have pricing plans like everyone else. Everybody has to pay to keep the lights on. But I'm finding mention of Unity, where they sort of swapped their licensing. So the small people that are testing and trying, that they don't have any costs until they start making X amount of dollars.
Right.
And
Yeah.
once they get over that, well, then they start paying, and they're paying based on what they make. But up until that point, you can get growing,
Right.
get
And that's a,
something
it's a
under your
pretty
feet.
fair pricing model, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I
Um,
think, for hobbyists, that works out great. And if you come across the
absolutely.
next great idea, you've got some runway before you have to start paying for your back end.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, if you wanted to get started with some Revit Wizard stuff, I can have
Absolutely.
Revit Wizard introduce himself. This is a new feature that is called Voice by OpenAI. So it's enabled on all the custom GPTs by default, obviously. So I'm on my mobile device right now, which there's an OpenAI mobile app that you can access Revit Wizard on. A few people have already tried it out and tweeted me about it, so feel free to do the same. But let's have Revit Wizard introduce himself. Hey, Revit Wizard. This is Daniel Peterson, and I am joined with Carl Storms from the Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks podcast. Can you introduce yourself?
Modern tech advisor and digital conjurer here to assist with all things Revit and BIM related. Whether it's navigating tricky software features or finding the best hacks to streamline your projects, I'm here to channel the wisdom of the internet and bring it straight to you. Ready to sprinkle some magic on your queries today.
All right, and obviously we can ask some more questions. So Carl, do you have any questions that you would want to ask the wizard?
Well, what
I think
should
I will have to ask it because I think
Yeah,
the way
it
that we
might
have
not
our
get
audio
through
right
there.
now.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess before I ask the wizard, and I appreciate him introducing himself to us, with the wizard itself, we call it the Revit Wizard, but it's really more of a, you know, all-encompassing sort of things. I know I saw you were on with the Revit Kid, and you were talking about how some Dynamos things that goes in there. So
Yeah.
I guess to start easy and to see how it goes, we can try the ever elusive. Can I open a 2023 family in my 2020 version of Revit?
A family or project? Which one do you want to do?
Project,
Okay,
yes, project.
okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Revit Wizard, I have a question. Am I able to open a Revit 2023 project in my Revit 2020 software? I need to figure this out.
Can you open a Revit 2023 project in Revit in 2020? Unfortunately, Revit does not support backward compatibility. This means you cannot open a Revit 2023 project directly in Revit 2020. The project file versions are not interchangeable, and Revit 2023 files cannot be downgraded to be compatible with Revit 2020. Tip: always coordinate with your team to ensure everyone is using the same Revit version to avoid compatibility issues. If you need to share models with someone using an older version, consider exporting to IFC format, though this may result in some data loss. Here are some related questions. Reply.
Nice.
All right, hopefully you're able to hear that. Yeah.
We could hear it, came through loud and clear. And I guess I have another question for the wizard, but then I have some questions about the person behind the screen, behind that. But for another question, maybe get a little bit harder. Ask the wizard if a wall is a system family, and if so, can I export it to a different model, different version of a Revit model?
All right, that is a little more tricky. So yeah, so let's see, let's get it. Hey, Revit Wizard. So is a wall a system family, and can I export it to another model?
Question.
It didn't hear me correctly. I did not say that correctly. It said custom family. Hold on. Hey, Revit Wizard, is a wall a system family, and can I export it to another model?
Is a wall a system family and can it be exported to another model? Yes, walls in Revit are considered system families. Unlike loadable families, system families are predefined within Revit and cannot be saved as separate family files, RFA. However, you can transfer wall types between projects using the Transfer Project Standards feature. Tip: to ensure consistency across projects, you can create a template project with your preferred wall types and other system families. Then use Transfer Project Standards to bring these settings into any new project. Here's how you can transfer wall types. 1, open both the store.
We don't have to go through all that technical stuff, but yeah, it did a pretty good job. Pretty impressed.
It did. And so, I mean, that's helpful. I can certainly imagine that if someone that hadn't used Revit and didn't know anything about that came across that question, they probably wouldn't have asked it like me. I was trying to trick it with the system family
Right.
and sort of two questions in one, but it handled it quite well. But that would be helpful because that's the type of question that someone would come into, or they might have said,
Of course.
I've got these walls. Why can't I save them like my doors or my chairs or something to that effect? The point is it understood. My question for you is, why does it understand?
So it understands because it is told, I guess, specifically where to get some of its information from. And then I have over the years acquired and created guides and Revit training and things like that. So I guess the biggest, background and training that I have was when I was at a company called Trio in Denver, Colorado, before COVID actually. And they hired me to basically bring Revit into their firm and to teach all of their interior designers how to use Revit, because they were all using AutoCAD, but they were starting to get projects in Revit and they were just like taking a shot in the dark, and they're really struggling. So they needed me to develop a template and then train all of their designers. And so I had a lot of opportunities to kind of get the basics down and to create a lot of material. And so it's been fed all of that material, a lot of questions and things. I've gone back and looked at all the chat logs and things like that and gotten any really good questions that I was like, this is a really good question. And then I go and find the solution, and training it on those has been really, really helpful. And honestly, it was amazing how much it already knew, though. I think the Revit kid kind of talked on this already too, that ChatGPT just by itself knows so much. Obviously, I talked or trained it a lot on Dynamo stuff, which is a little bit more specific and niche. And then the more niche you get, obviously, the more training it's going to need. But if you do a lot of training and then do a lot of retraining, so you trick it and then say, no, that's not right, this is what the right answer is, that really does kind of get it going in the right direction. And a lot of times, you'll fix one thing and it's similar to other hallucinations that it might have. And so because you've corrected it here, it's corrected a whole web of hallucinations from possibly happening again. So the more cleanup you do, it really does clean up the web quite a bit. And then obviously the more training that you do, you have to go back and clean up again.
So I guess the question that comes up for me from that is, but what you're saying about the idea of, if it gives you an hallucination, it gives you an answer that is incorrect or isn't in the way you would like it to be presented, you can go in and say, okay, thanks for your feedback, but actually it's this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
And I found even like with just regular ChatGPT, the free account, you can do that. You can tell it that that's not the expected output, and it will take that into an advisement. Now, it's a little different with the free version. Again, it puts it into the web and it goes into that big model in there. So it may or may not feed it, but I'm curious, with it being a custom GPT that you're the overseer of, the overlord of the wizard, if you will, if you have a little more pull with that, like if you say, no, it should be this, it's a smaller data set that you're correcting.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's why they designed GPTs to kind of function that way, because obviously ChatGPT itself, just the regular chat bot, is cool. It's a very generic chat bot, though. It's not niched unless you say, pretend you are an expert in XYZ, and then you kind of give it that role. And that's something that that I'd like to talk about at the end, is the importance of prompt engineering. I think that's a skill that everybody's going to need to learn, and I think the quicker that we kind of learn that and pick it up, the better. I think that's the definition of that's going to change, and what that looks like, it's going to change over time. But I think every single person at this point has seen a little AI chat window at some point. If you use a computer, those aren't going to go away. So we're just going to have to figure out how to start getting good at using those.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And the idea of, having that prompt engineering, or whatever you want to call it. I know some people don't like the word engineering in there.
Of course, yeah.
But the idea about knowing how to talk to it. And one of the things that came up in our conversation we had at the round table, and it was one of those things that, the chat GPT or the chat bot or the Revit Wizard, they don't have feelings, they're just, they're not like that. However, if you talk to them with civility and like you're having a regular conversation, you'll find that you get that back. Even though they're not really having a person, they try to reflect your tone. And so if you talk to them in that manner with politeness and you say please and thank you, you'll find that it comes back to you, which sometimes confuses people, but it's also a bit weird. But then it becomes more conversational.
And then kind of on the flip side of that, if you kind of take the technical writing approach and you're very factual and it's data that you're putting in, you're going to get data out. It is very much going to match your tone. That is definitely something that I've noticed, especially when I think you touched on Unity earlier. Unreal Engine is another one that's very similar to Unity that I'm learning right now. And I've been using ChatGPT to generate the code and things like that. And I've noticed that the tone, when you're very specific about code, it doesn't include any fluff or language or anything like that, like it was just doing. It's going to be very to the point, just give you the code, copy paste. Is there anything that you want to change? And that's it. So it is really interesting, and it's going to match kind of what you put in. And if you're kind of, I don't want to say mean to it, but if you're rude to it or things like that, it may not necessarily give you full answers and things like that. I've noticed things like that as well in
Yep.
testing.
Absolutely. And you bring a good point about the coding. If you're just learning or you're new to a syntax, tell it that. Say, I would like
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
code this. Give it as much detail as you can and say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Right. Right.
Maybe
Oh,
not
it's so
5-year-old
good
for
at that.
coding,
Yeah.
but it's good. Then the other thing that I found is you can ask that, it will give you the broad strokes, and usually
Right.
it'll give you bullet point or numbered versions. And then you can say, please explain in more detail, bullet 2. And then it just opens up the floodgates and you get, step by step
Exactly.
directions, and it becomes
Yep.
very good. And it's really good at that. It's us as the people that are asking it or directing it that aren't good. And that's usually when you get a failed outcome. It's more likely that you didn't ask it the right question or ask it the
Correct.
right way or the way that you think you should to get the outcome you want. I don't want to clarify that you didn't ask a good question, but it wasn't
Right.
the right question for the outcome that you were hoping for.
Right. Yeah, I've seen quite a few posts on Twitter, and maybe some people on here have even seen me chime in where they'll try to like stump like the AI and be like, oh look, this didn't work. And I don't want to say user error, but usually I can prove that if you just ask it in a different way and you have a little bit more logic and you know how it's coming up with those answers, it really does help you craft your question or your prompt to it so that it provides the right solution. I think when you're not specific with how you want your response, it's going to give you the response as if you're just the most generic person ever. So if you're a BIM manager, if you're an architect or an engineer, tell it that, and it's going to respond to you as such. So that I think that's, if there's anything to take away, it would be that.
And I think that's a good point because I've done a lot of talking and seeing about AI, and a lot of times the emphasis or the onus is put on, I'm going to give it a prompt and you're an expert at this and you're doing that and you're doing this, or perhaps explain to me like a
Right.
5-year-old, but never the reverse of that. I'm an
Exactly.
expert
Yeah.
in this
Who
decision.
you
I
are.
understand what's going on, but I missed this little point. Can you explain it to me as if we're peer equals?
Right.
And then you would get it like that. I've never looked at it that way, so I think that's
Yeah, that is about half of the prompt right there is who you are as well. That's very, very important. And that's actually something that I've actually pre-programmed into Revit Wizard, is that the people that are going to be asking Revit Wizard questions are going to be AEC professionals or architecture students or people that are learning Revit and things like that. So it knows to tailor its responses in a way that are student oriented. But as soon as you say, I am a project manager or I'm so and so, it's going to change it. It's going to refine it a little bit more, and what you say is going to override kind of what's one layer back in the system prompt.
so this is completely off topic, but it just popped into my head. I'm going to ask the question. Have you, I guess, programmed, trained any Easter eggs into the Revit Wizard? So say, for example, if the Revit kid comes in and he says, hey, it's Jeff, and then would you reply, hey, Revit kid, thanks for using the Revit Wizard?
So what's funny is I did program one in, well, not really an Easter egg, but I let it know that today we were doing the podcast and I wasn't sure what it was going to do. And so when it introduced itself, it didn't bring it up or anything like that, but it did act very excited. So I want to say that it was because of that. Way
Nice.
more excited than before an hour or two ago when I programmed that in. When I tested that, it didn't act as excited, but as soon as I said, that we were on the podcast, it was like, woo,
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear that
magical
it's
stuff.
got some, it's the magical and the conjuring. I noticed all of that. And I was going to
Yeah.
ask, did you program that in there? Because it's sort
Yeah,
of
just ever
exactly
so slightly. I mean, it knows that it's the Revit Wizard, so it must have really dialed into that character for the show.
with the conjurings, and it mentioned hacks and it sort of brought all that into place. So
Yeah.
I was sort of impressed that it did that and brought it into place, and which slowly brings us back to the train of thought we were on before I just derailed us there. We were talking about the idea of giving, this is what you are that's giving me the answer, this is what I am as receiving the answer.
Right.
One of the things that I have found working with just regular GPTs, chat GPT, whatever, is that you may be going down a road, whether you're in a conversation, you've asked several questions, or you're trying to get something and you're just not getting the output that you want. You've asked it a couple different ways, you've asked a couple different things, and
Right.
it's not giving you what you want. One of the things that I've found that helps with that is I can take the knowledge I've learned for that 5 minutes or 20-minute conversation and go to a different chatbot,
Yep. Start a fresh
or
one.
just like you say, just start a fresh chat
Hmm.
with, you have now more information, you put it in there and it gives you that data.
Right.
Does that
Or
same
you
function
can
out?
even copy sections that this was correct. Not feeling so hot about this. Can we look at this again? Things like that. It's really, really good at that. I mean, editing is fantastic. So even instructions that it spits out, I will copy them and edit them and be like, you have these two steps reversed. And then it is fantastic, fantastic at editing and revising and improving. It kind of just needs you as the human to kind of be its partner to kind of, work together to kind of get there.
Yeah, exactly. That conversational, that back and forth,
Right.
like your writing partner. Um, but does that same functionality, that same ability work with a custom GPT because it has more of a shorter memory, if you will?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I will say memory is a new feature of ChatGPT. That's something that you can turn on and off in your settings, your personal settings on your account, and you can see what it remembers. So you'll notice over time as you use ChatGPT, if you've said something that it thinks it's going to need to know again in the future, like for instance, earlier I had it give me a random restaurant for the city that I'm in, just because I was like, I don't know what's for dinner tonight. Give me a random restaurant in, wherever. And then it let me know, memory updated, you are currently in so and so city. So little things like that, it's going to work the same in Revit. If you're working on a student housing project and you're talking about student housing, and then all of a sudden you ask a code question, it may be able to reference and give you specifics to what you were talking about in a completely different thread, because of it remembers, oh, you're working on a student housing project right now. And all of those memories are manageable under that memory tab in the user profile.
That is very cool. I didn't know that. And again, maybe because the free version, it's a little bit different. But one thing I also noticed about that when we were checking out the new ChatGPT interface today is that even with the free version, I can now connect it to my Google Drive or my OneBox and
Correct,
have it
yeah.
review data inside of my own repository.
Correct. Yes. So right now, like literally, like they announced it less than 24 hours ago, the free users are going to be able to get the code interpreter, which is the being able to do all the coding stuff, the memory, a bunch of other different features that were pay only. So right now, the only difference between a paid account and a free account is the ability to make custom GPTs and the rate limit. Which is very, very interesting because right now there's not much of an incentive. Now, obviously, I can speculate in the next 3 or so months, they're probably going to release ChatGPT 5, and that's going to want everyone's going to want to get a paid account so they can
Yeah,
try
to
that
get that.
out. So I'm sure that's the direction that they're going. But for the time being, a free account is really, really good. So they're in the process of upgrading all the services right now. But the coding, I don't think you can do the image generation. I think that was one of the only other things that you cannot do. But the memory and things like that, you're going to be able to have access to.
Very cool. And I guess it becomes down to the they want to entice people to use their platform because, as we said earlier, you become familiar with a particular platform. If you want
Right.
those extra features, I'm going to pay for this one I'm familiar with instead of one of the 7 other versions that are out there that are all charging me $20 a month.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Cool. So we're getting close to the end, but before we get to the end, and before I ask you the question about the hack, there was something else in that I completely forgot that we talked about earlier that you wanted to bring up at the end of the episode.
Oh yeah, that was it was the hack.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was referring to, which is just to get really good at prompt engineering, and also use if you're a BIM manager, if you're in the support role, or if you're just learning Revit, use Revit Wizard. I have programmed and done a lot of work so that you don't have to like remind it. I'm working in Revit right now. Anytime you're using just regular ChatGPT, you're going to need to remind it, I'm working in Revit. This is what I'm doing. This is who I am. So it does take a good few steps out of the equation for you. And then obviously it has a good bit of training and knowledge that I've built up. So feel free to use Revit Wizard as much as you want. There's a support button as well, so you can give feedback if you find something that you're like, oh, I found one, an incorrect one. Feel free to share it with me on Twitter or anywhere online, or you can just submit like with the little thumbs down arrow, and that'll go to me as well. But yeah, feel free to use AI. It's free right now, so like use it. The 40 messages every 3 hours is a pretty good rate limit. So just go ahead and test it out, see what it can do and cannot do. And I really think it's going to help. And if you're in a support role, instead of taking the time to kind of answer questions and things like that, just copy the question, put it in the wizard. If you like the response, just send it back. That's what I've been doing. It's saved me hours and hours and hours of work.
Well, that's all very cool. My question, to play a little bit on the cynical side,
Yeah,
there's a reason you do it in that particular way, is because you give the question, you get the answer, you're in a position of knowing how good the answer is before you send it to the person that asked the question, as opposed to
right.
just saying, here's a link to the Revit Wizard, ask the question.
Say that
So
again?
so the idea is that your answer, if they have trouble keeping up with support, is to
Yeah.
put the question into Revit Wizard. They verify that's the right answer and then send the answer to the user, as opposed to just saying, here's Revit Wizard, talk to it.
Yeah, I mean, you could just do that, of course. Yeah, I would absolutely do that. If you're a little bit more hesitant as to letting your team just run wild with an AI, which I think that harkens back to what we were talking
Yeah.
about at the very beginning. I know that not everybody is like gung-ho about AI, so that's why I kind of mention it that way. If you want to kind of be the gatekeeper for it until you're comfortable with rolling it out, then yeah, I would do whatever you're comfortable with. If you just want to give Revit Wizard to your team and say, go for it, that's awesome. If you want to create your own, I would highly encourage that as well. That way you can start to get company standards and things like that kind of ingrained into your own, maybe architecture wizard or MEP wizard or whatever you want. And if you want help with that, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, so hopefully that answered.
It did. That's very awesome. All the information will be in the bottom here somewhere
Absolutely.
to get in touch. I do have one other question, and that leads back to what you were saying. If you use the wizard, if you want to make your own version, that's fine.
Mhm.
Are or can GPTs be kind of like a repository on GitHub? Like, are you able to say, hey, you want to make a MEP version of the Revit Wizard? Here's my database. Is that possible, or is it not
Yeah,
really
so
that way?
for most of it, yeah. So I didn't really get into I think I got into it on the Revit Kid show at the end of the builder, where you can kind of see some of the inner workings. But there's that whole custom instruction section that can obviously be made public to everybody. The only thing that really can't be kind of emulated and just copied and pasted easily from, AI to AI is all the training and rework and talking to it and trying to stump it really, and then correcting it. That does not just copy over with the instructions. So things like the custom instructions and kind of how it responds, and things like that, the inner workings, that we can easily copy over. But some of the training, it's a little bit more difficult. You would need the training material and then to feed it and things like that.
And maybe that's a future option, just
Of
like
course, yeah.
we saw John Pearson having his Dynamo package automatically deploy from GitHub. Maybe we can
Right.
link to a Google Drive or to a GitHub, and the community shares one sort of repository to put that in there.
Right,
Again,
yeah.
using it for the purpose of good, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Open BIM, yeah.
Love it. All right, so we're coming to the end here. I know we sort of talked about the hack of prompt engineering, but did you have anything else to add to the hat officially now that we're at the end of the episode?
Yeah, so let me just make sure I pull up my notes that I had. I did have some notes for the prompt engineering. So like we kind of said earlier, I just have some tips that I always like to keep on my person when I'm kind of prompting. So I'll share these as my kind of hack or my tip. I've just highlighted a few of these. So there's no need to be polite. So no need to say like please and thank you. But obviously if you say please and thank you, you're going to get that back. Integrate the intended audience into the prompt. So we kind of talked about that. And then obviously who you are as well, which we talked about. Break down complex tasks into sequences of simpler prompts and interactive conversations. So that's like, I think I've demoed this a little bit on Twitter when I created the Revit Wizard Revit plugin. I created a very complex prompt that was about 4 or 5 paragraphs long, and gave it to the wizard, and it was able to give me the code, everything that I needed step by step, and what I needed to do step by step in like Visual Studio for how to create a Revit plugin, just step by step. And all of the coding was taken care of by the AI. So if you're very, very specific with it, it's going to give you very, very specific results. You can add phrases like "your task is" and "you must" if you're failing to get the results that you need. And then if you absolutely need to, you can use things like "you will be penalized," and that seems to really motivate it.
Mhm. That's great. That's good things. I've heard some of those before. Again, the biggest one that was new to me was the idea of what your level of expertise is if you're not the
Right, yeah.
5-year-old. And I don't know where I just recently saw that whole idea about the reward versus penalty versus reward for it, and they
Yeah,
understand that. They understand, and again, it's not like
absolutely, yeah.
they're
It's
happy to get
weird.
a
There's like
banana.
a graph where they like
Yeah,
show there's like a spike where accuracy
yeah.
improves if you like say you're gonna give it $20 or something.
uh,
Yeah.
but they understand the benefit of performing well, or to where you
Right.
conceive as well. So yeah, I think that's great. Awesome. I appreciate you being on the show, Daniel. And as we're coming to an
Thank you,
end,
of course.
just our typical run of the mill sign off here. And thank you and everyone for joining us for another episode of Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, where we explore the tools, technology, and time saving hacks that are shaping the future. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe. Again, button down here somewhere. And stay tuned for more insights from the exciting world of AECO and technology. Until next time, keep building, innovating, and exploring the possibilities. But wait, there's more.
It's so funny. In 2 different podcasts now, I've meant to bring it up, and of course, I remember it as soon as it's over, but that's okay. About how sad it is that for every 7 people that retire in the AEC industry, only 1 person starts new. And like how that's probably going to be a problem in a few years because so much talent is leaving.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to kind of use AI to kind of capture as much of that expertise and things like that as we kind of move forward, because people are retiring and they're not going to like look back and things like that. So I think it's going to be important to kind of capture as much as we can of kind of the old way of doing things, because pretty soon it's going to be AI teaching AI, and that's going to be interesting.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you say that because I hadn't heard that stat, but it doesn't surprise me that fairies haven't leave one comes
Yeah,
back
it's
in.
really, I mean, obviously it varies country to country, but overall it's 7-1, which is crazy. And we're really losing him to, excuse me, we're losing him to game development.
Yeah,
People don't, like, these engineering mind kids, they're like, do I want to go into architecture, which seems like everybody's miserable? Or do I want to go into the game development, which seems really fun and exciting and new? And I don't know, I feel like we need to figure out a way to like gamify the AEC industry a little bit.
yeah, for sure. I had another thought, and then about the people leaving, people coming in, and you kind of hit it on the head there when you said the idea that we need to use AI to kind of record
Right,
those
yeah, to
things.
capture all of that knowledge, yeah. That like, I mean, I don't know, I've seen weird YouTube videos where it's like grandmothers in Italy that like these are the last 6 people that know how to make pasta this very one particular way. And I'm like, that's a perfect use case for like teaching AI so that that art is never lost or something like that?
Yeah, and
And obviously like, in other contexts as well, but not just pasta.
well, and the thing is that the AI is getting so good at that. Like even John was talking about, and I've got it too, that voice note app where it's basically an AI that's local that you talk to it, and then it can do whatever
Mhm.
you want with your notes. It's easy. Grandma could easily talk in whatever language she
Of
wants,
course, yeah.
record the data, just a complete mind dump, and
Right.
then it can recipes, techniques, whatever. And then as it gets better at interpreting videos, well, not only are they talking to the phone, well, they could have it being recorded. They could merge the two together.
Mhm.
And that's what the construction needs. Instead of an exit interview, it's an exit year. And
Right.
Joe Blow that's on the site spends all that time recursioning that data, because once it's gone, it's gone, and that's the only spot that
Right.
it is in Bob's head from the site for 30
Yeah.
years. So
Yep.